last link, I'm linking to weather,
Of
right?
course.
So I was like, thank you so much for joining us. We're now going to go over to the weather center for some weather. And then we cut to weather. And I literally just put my head on the table and I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And I just lie there. So my head is on the table. I'm not asleep,
You're
like
not asleep.
snoring.
Okay.
But also that is not a position for a news anchor. And then I just all of a sudden in my earpiece, I'm hearing all sorts of panic in the background. Ayanda, get up. And then I wake up, and I think if you look at the clip, I sort of wake up and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, you do. You do. I
And
saw
then I'm
that.
just like, what's all the fuss? And I move because I didn't know that I'd bled on air. I didn't realize that it went on air.
I can't do no small talk, no small talk. I'm not with the small talk. Can't be with the small talk.
Well, welcome to 5 Unscripted. The concept is very simple. Every week we sit down with fascinating people, and this week is no exception. She is a news anchor turned radio broadcaster turned government spokesperson and, wait for it, a musician. Please welcome Ayanda Allie to 5 Unscripted. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Thabo. It's such a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
It's been a long time coming, but thank you.
It has been. I think you and I have been trying to plan this since COVID days, and my title changed several times in
Several
the meanwhile.
times.
Yeah,
And even, we've been also chatting. You've been sending voice notes, in your voice notes and statements in your capacity as a spokesperson.
Yeah.
So it feels good to finally actually meet the person.
I know, and
Yeah.
it's so weird because having to say to you, "Nice to meet you," and I'm like, but that's weird because I feel like I've met you already. We've been communicating, but it's a sign of the times, I guess.
Exactly. I mean, we see each other's WhatsApp stories.
Yeah,
Unashamedly.
Exactly. And now to have to say "nice to meet you," Tao, was just like so strange because I feel like we have met, but yeah, there's no good a time as the present, I guess.
Now, let's talk about Ayanda, the broadcaster, right? You, in my opinion, have had some of the most coveted jobs in the industry. I mean, you did Morning Live. You've had a few really comfortable radio gigs, right? Including, I remember when a radio station had just launched, you were part of their star-studded lineup. And now you're still in broadcasting, but you've essentially worn many hats, right? But I also think you're one of the very few genuinely talented broadcasters. I had Quinita Hunter on a couple of months ago.
Oh my word, I love her.
Isn't she amazing?
She's incredible.
And she said, when she started out, she had to learn how to be a good broadcaster. And it's something you learn, and you pick it up and you thrive. But for some people, it just comes so naturally. I think you're one of those people. How did it start for you? There's I always hear about the TMTFTL, too much, too fast, too loud when you're younger. Yeah. And that's when you realize, okay, maybe I should be in front of a microphone.
I'm going to steal that acronym, by the way, because it's so applicable in this context.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, by the way. I just really am grateful for how you viewed my career thus far. Absolutely. One of those where, if you're at home and there's some guests, your mom would call you and say, come and greet. And then you would greet. And then if there were other cousins there, you're singing and dancing, etc. Always at the forefront. But I think more than anything for me, I've always been inquisitive. I've always wanted to know why, how things work. I've always been someone who's socially aware, even though at a young age, you don't really have the vocabulary to speak about things like, dichotomy, about the haves and the have-nots, about, upward mobility, about socio-political issues. You don't really have the capacity to really discuss those things, but you have a keen interest because you're aware. I grew up in Dobsonville in Soweto, but I went to school in the suburbs, for example. So crossing between those two worlds, you have questions, of your parents, of your teachers, etc. So I've always been someone who has been very willing to engage adults, my peers, etc. So why do you think this is? How do we change that, etc. And I think that natural inclination of mine really steered me towards journalism. And of course, because, I was kekelezing a little bit at school, so I was really good at English, really good at history, really good at those kind of theory subjects, really did not apply myself more in things like mathematics, etc. So it was just natural for me when I had to go to varsity to go and take more of your humanities and your social sciences, which led me to broadcasting.
It's interesting you said you had these questions. Barbara Walters says, a good journalist always has to be curious, and it's a very common, like, I guess, trait in a lot of us. You're very curious about certain things, and you mentioned, growing up in Dobsonville, going to school in the suburbs. You kind of have questions about both those worlds, why they're so different. What's the social construct that defined the status quo at the time,
Absolutely.
and and it leads you to where you are now, I guess, in some way. So you go to varsity and you study
Communication
communications.
science. Yeah.
Me too.
Really?
Me too.
Yeah, I did communication science.
Really?
Yeah, I did. I started out at what was then Monash University for my first year. And then because I then started to work, on radio, behind the scenes, community radio, I then moved to distance learning. I finished my undergrad degree through UNISA. So I was working as a journalist, finishing this undergrad degree and really doing the theory and the practical, which really benefited me. And I think that's why I was able to, once I got into the public broadcaster, really just flew, because I had all these experiences as a community radio journalist.
And I actually have a very interesting graduation story. I'll tell you. I don't know if I should tell you now.
Please tell me.
Okay, so you and I graduated on the same day. This was like a day or two after Winnie Mandela passed away. I kid you not. This was a couple of years ago, and I was working for another radio station at the time.
Yeah.
And you got your certificate, your degree in community development this time.
Yes, so that was the second
Right.
undergrad.
Yes, that
degree.
was your second
Yes,
degree.
oh my goodness, yes,
Yep.
in Pretoria.
Yes, in Pretoria. And I hear the name. I'm like, no, is this obviously not you're Ayanda Allie now, but I hear Ayanda Allie Payne, and I think no. And then I hear a woman yell, "That's my sister!"
Yes.
And I go, "Is that Ayanda Allie Payne?" And then I zoomed in, and then it was you.
You've got my files.
I kid
You've
you
got
not.
my secrets.
I kid you not. So literally, I go up and I get my certificate, and those after me were going to line up as well. And then I go, let me just go introduce myself. And at the time, days before, I've got a bit of a big mouth. Days before, there was a story about you joining a certain radio station. You were going to be the breakfast star anchor. And I was like, I'm very curious. I want to congratulate her, maybe. And so I went up to you and I introduced myself and I said, congratulations on the gig. And you said, oh, thank you, but I'm not taking it anymore.
Yeah.
And I went, really? And you
Yeah.
said, no, I'm not taking it anymore. But obviously, like I said, you've had these incredible jobs. One of them was Morning Live. Can you believe it? I remember my grandfather saying, I think you were absent for one episode. And he said, where's that young lady with the dreadlocks? You still had
I had my dreads then, yes.
you still had
Yes.
dreadlocks. And what was it about, I guess, being in that space? I mean, the late Vuyombuli, Morning Live is this, I want to say, a legacy project, and now you're a part of it. How was that like?
I think with every single job that I have accepted, there was always meaning behind it. So I would never want to do anything for the sake of just doing it, which is why when you came to congratulate me about that other radio station, everything was almost signed, sealed, and delivered. But I had to ask myself, does this advance, the purpose, my agenda, where I think I'm going and what God has for me? And when I sat down and I reflected, I thought, no. And even though it was a very lucrative offer, it was quite a prestigious platform as well, I decided to decline that. But when Morning Live came, I think at that time I was also doing television with a different news channel. And I literally got a phone call that said, would you be interested in, coming to the public broadcaster? And it was not for Morning Live, by the way. And I thought to myself, no, I'm quite happy where I am. Everything is fine. And this person pursued me relentlessly, called that week, called again, called a third time and said, please just come and meet with us. Came through, sat down, had the meeting. And I just prayed about it and I thought about it. I reflected and I thought, okay, maybe this challenge or this opportunity might work. It was only after I signed the contract did I find out that you were actually going to go to Morning Live. And at that point, I'm like, sorry, come again. Words?
You're kidding.
I'm telling you. Because I too had grown up watching Morning Live. It was such an incredible platform. And having the opportunity to go there really, really grew me. It helped me to have a desire to see the country, to speak to all kinds of people. We'd have we'd have outside broadcasts in Kakamas in the Northern Cape, and then the next day you're in front of a sitting head of state and you're having that interview. And then the day after that, you're at taxi rank speaking to taxi drivers. Then the day after that, you're somewhere in a wine estate, and I think it really gave me a texture of what South Africa was about. I got to the granular details on the ground and I fell hopelessly in love with this country and her people. And I really got such a stronger sense for social justice. I think doing Morning Live really, really gave me the desire to even want to start community projects back home, etc. I think that's what it really reignited, a passion in me to see this country work.
And now, then something about you is, I've mentioned this to you off air, that you have this way about you in your broadcasting. I just remember thinking, I don't want her just reading news copy and throwing to the sports guy. I see her doing something, I don't know, a bit more about maybe, I don't know, even if it's like a fiery, like 1 hour political talk show or lifestyle or whatever, and eventually you do. But when do you realize that, okay, I think I'm gonna give the news copy a break?
Yeah. I think, a lot of people don't know this about me, but news was accidental.
Really?
It was never supposed to be news for me. When I started out in varsity, first year, they say, you need some experience. Here's a practical, go somewhere, any broadcaster, and, learn the ropes in something, fill out this form and bring it back for marks, I do that. I land up at Rainbow FM. It's a community radio station. And I'm like, I just need 40 hours. So send me in any direction and I'll be fine, And they said, well, can you read? I said, yeah. They're like, okay, can you read English? I said, yeah. They're like, okay, here's a microphone. You're now a news anchor. I'm like, sorry, what? I sit there, I read the news, I'm shaking like a leaf. And I'm like, okay, after the first bulletin, I'm like, this wasn't so bad. You do another one and then another one and then another one. And before you know it, now you're like, okay, I think I can try this news anchor thing. I go to a different platform that is now a commercial platform. And that's just how I grew. And you become typecast, right? They know you now as a news anchor because that's how
true.
You were introduced to
Definitely.
broadcasting.
Yeah.
And then years later, okay, one place to another, you land up on Morning Live, you land up on different stations, and now this is what you are. But whenever I'm interviewing a politician, a CEO, anybody in any professional capacity, I'd always be wondering about who this person is as a human being. What makes them tick? What gives them, a vibe? What makes them happy? What are some of their pains, their sorrows? What makes them who they are? And that for me would always be my driving force. Yes, I would ask all the questions you need to know. Where is the money? What did you do with it? Da, 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 da.
Yeah.
But behind the scenes, I'd always wonder about the person. And so when an opportunity came right here at the SABC for me to do a talk show with SABC2, I grabbed it with both hands and I never looked back. And I think through the years and everything else that I've done, be it in government, etc., it's always been about social justice. It's always been about understanding the fabric of our society, what makes us who we are, what makes the individual, what makes the community and the society. And I think that's sort of the direction that I've been pursuing since then.
I mean, I remember a couple of years ago, you had done this interview, and with your interviews, it was always, I think your best ones were always the ones where certain subject matter just happened to intersect with news. I remember a couple of years ago, you interviewed Malusi Gigaba's ex-wife, okay, and you were just very casually asking her, so how's it going in the marriage? And then she let it slip that, well, I sometimes I help out in the office, and that led to like there was so much outrage. People were angry, and somebody wrote an article about that, and then an article gets written about that article, and it just blows up. You even forget the source.
Up in Parliament and all sorts of things.
Believe that. So I think about stories like that. It's never the end. It's never the end game for you when you do an interview like that, is it? It's just like you say. There is this kind of curiosity. I'm not trying to make these, reveal these bombshells
or be sensational.
Of course. And that's what I got from watching that interview, is that you really weren't trying to kind of reel her in and get her to. She just happened to sing like a canary. And let me tell you something. I was there for the whole bit. I absolutely loved it.
I actually felt terrible.
I can imagine.
I felt horrible about that. Also because I feel like we were two people similar to what we're doing now.
Yeah.
Just having a genuine, authentic conversation.
Yeah.
And we just happened to have cameras around us. And I really felt a sense of, I got to speak to the individual. Both of our guards were down. None of us were thinking, oh, news anchor or, oh, minister's wife, etc. We literally were two women having a chat over tea, and she had shared things that, and I felt I understood in context, saying, oh, when I'm with my partner, if he's into aviation, for example, I feel like I'm in that office, right? I'm in that airplane with him, and girl, he brings his problems right back into the bedroom. You know what I mean? So that's what I thought. And even after that, this huge conversation, it was only when it went on air that I realized, oh, wait, hang on. Because that was not the intention. That was never the intention.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Was that your last, I guess, hard news job, was it?
I do believe so.
I think so too. Because,
yes, I do. Yes.
Yeah, at the Blue Channel, right?
Correct, at the Blue Channel. That was.
We call it the Blue Channel.
That was my last really big,
And then at some point, then you're appointed the spokesperson for the Minister of Transport. Yeah. I even remember the tweet. I was like, no ways. She's becoming a spokesperson. And that's a very general trajectory for a lot of journalists. People don't know. You get tired of newsrooms and you decide, okay, I want maybe a bit of stability. But how was it like being on the other side of the microphone, especially defending a minister who some people deem controversial? Because now you are that person's, I guess, mouthpiece. I mean, how was that like? I can imagine awkward encounters with former colleagues. I don't know.
Look, for me, it really was a natural progression.
Mm-hmm.
I'd started out as a journalist.
Yeah.
I was reporting on what was making news. I'm on the outside looking in, speaking about some of the things that are happening in society. I really desired to see a change in the world that we live in. And so I started Bukobami Youth Center, myself and a couple of friends, which operates in Dobsonville and Soweto, because we wanted to change the narrative and the story that we're seeing on the ground. We thought, what can we do to contribute to the betterment of society? And that's what we did. But doing the work at Bukobami really then gave me a hunger for governance and government. How does it work? What does policy look like? How does it become, something that we see in black and white in terms of legislation? I loved that process and understanding more about it. I actually prayed. Very few people know this, but I prayed and I was like, Lord, I really would love to explore how this country runs from a government perspective. I've been in news. I have that perspective. I've been on the ground through Bukobami. I understand that. I want to know now this particular tier of running a country. How does it work? And so when I was called to work with Minister Mbalula, I think it was new for him and for myself, because I was referred to him. He was never going to pick me, I don't think. I would never wake up and say, this is what I want to do. But I was so grateful for that experience. I learned a tremendous amount of information in terms of processes. I learned so much. And people are like, it must have been hard working with him. I was like, well, it was challenging in terms of the workload, because he's such an active minister. He'd wake up in the morning and say, let's go deal with taxi businesses in Cape Town. You're like, okay, let's go, And then he'd come through and he's like, we need to talk about transformation in aviation. And you're like, okay, let's go. And then he'd be like, okay, the railway sector is under turmoil in different places. Let's go there. But I loved that, because that's the only way that you get to grow. If you have a minister who is quiet, who is lax, who is not doing anything, there's nothing to communicate. There's nothing for you to speak about. But if you have a minister who's active, who's vocal, who goes out of their way to actually do something and say something, it increases your own capacity. I always say that the only way you build muscle is through resistance. If you pick up those weights and it's heavy, etc., before you know it, you're like, okay, my biceps are looking quite good. So that's what that job did for me. It gave me an eye into how government works, how governance processes work. It gave me a passion to communicate, development communication and developmental issues. And I'm grateful for that job. I really, really am.
And also, you fully embraced it, because I remember you even introduced this concept known as, now I know, as spokesreporting.
Yes.
And basically you were, it's a merge of, I guess, reporting on the news or whatever it is that comes from the newsmaker with being a spokesperson. I mean, I got so many sound bites out of that. I didn't have to call you. I didn't have to. And obviously, as a desk reporter, the most grueling thing is having to pick up the phone and call a spokesperson. Some spokespeople didn't answer their cell phones, but you did. You did it very, very well. And then you moved on to the next one, and then you became the head of comms at Sanral, right? And then how was that like? Because I can imagine you are on the receiving end of people's wrath, because...
Look, Yeah. Sorry to
No, because
to
people don't want
interrupt.
to. People don't want to pay e-tolls. You don't want to be the office that communicates that to people.
I loved the challenge. I think for me, I run towards wherever the fire is. And that's what journalists do as well. But I love doing work again that gives meaning. Work where I feel like my input will be able to translate into something that will change whatever situation is there. So moving on from the ministerial role, and the reason why I left there, I was finishing off my masters, etc. But I also didn't want to stay in that role for too long because, again, like broadcasting, you get typecast. This is who you are and that's all you are. So when the time for me came for me to do something else, I thought, let me stay in transport, finish off my master's degree, etc. But I found the two were completely different worlds. Whereas the one, when you're working in a political office, you're on the ground, you're putting out fires, you're meeting with people, your sleeves are rolled up, you're living out of your suitcase, running from one issue to another, having meetings with people who can really change the trajectory of the country. And then the other one was more of an office job, with Sandrell. And there's nothing wrong with that. We do need to sit down and actually put together media releases, etc. But I found that for my passion for people and being on the ground and really rolling up my sleeves, it was something that gave me limited creativity. And I struggled with that, if I'm being honest. I really did. And it was also in the height of COVID, so you're not even able to go to the office and meet with your colleagues. You are desk bound at home, just, signing things and issuing things from the desktop as opposed to being on the ground. So for me, that was quite jarring. And it was something that really made me reevaluate what my strengths were. It's like, I think me interacting with people is one of my strongest attributes. And then I think I need to exercise that even more. But I loved the entity, by the way. I think Sandrell is such a well-run entity. It's an incredible entity. We don't speak much about it because it's been tarnished by the drama around e-tolls. But if you want to look at good governance in terms of government entities, it's one of the best.
So we're talking about, obviously, you're a government spokesperson, you're doing radio, you're doing television, obviously at different phases. But at the same time, you're doing this while you're running your NGO, Bukobami. I mean, it's a passion project of yours. Why is it so important? Firstly, tell me about it. What is it and why is it so important?
Bukobami is my heart. It's my heart. I think if you want to really have an understanding of who Ayanda is, you can't remove me from the work that goes on in Soweto. Bukobami Youth Center is an after-school care program. It runs in Dobsonville and Soweto, in the very house where I was born and raised, by the way.
Wow.
We've converted the bedrooms and the lounge and the kitchen into classrooms where you have your senior high school learners from under-resourced communities in Soweto, predominantly Dobsonville. They would come there. They come there Monday to Friday. Sometimes if we have extra programs, it runs until Saturday and Sunday, and they get educational assistance, they get skills development and training, career guidance and mentorship, psychosocial assistance, recreational activities. It's basically somewhere where you can go and get wholesome activities after school for the teenagers. One of them, of course, I wish I was, because growing up, and I got involved in all sorts of things I had no business getting involved in. And if I had a place where I could, call home, a second home, a place of refuge that really helped me harness my skills, I really think, there's so much potential that would have emerged from this person. There's no regrets, of course, because all of our journeys lead us to where we need to be. But I really look at these young people who come to the center, the fire, the passion that they have, the purpose that they have, and how by the time they leave, they go to varsity, they go into apprenticeship, learnerships, etc. And it just makes me so happy. So this is what we do at Bukobami. 8 years now. We've been
8 years
doing it
old.
8 years now.
I love that, because one thing the Inyobeni Tavern tragedy prompted was this now wide discussion about the importance of recreational activity for young children in the townships. Because now, if you don't, obviously, whether it's parks, swimming pools, they're vandalized, and there's nothing to do for you as a teenager growing up in a township. You resort to things like alcohol, and it was a huge debate during that time. And I'm sure now your NGO does a lot of important work in that regard. And are you seeing the results? Are you seeing the results in the children in maybe how you engage with them? And
Absolutely.
yeah.
Absolutely. I think you're right. I mean, my mum used to always say, an idle hand is the devil's playground. If you have nothing to do, you're going to find destructive things to do. Teenage
Definitely.
pregnancy, drug and alcohol abuse, violence, crime, and criminal behavior. These things are rampant in the township, not because the young people in the township do not want a better future. It's because there's no opportunities. There's a lack of access to activities that could really advance your outlook in life and your career prospects, your employability, not just employment. So we see young people who come there, they've got zeal, they've got passion, they want to do great things. And if they have nowhere to release this outlet, to release this passion, it can be channeled in the wrong direction. So we work with a number of different organizations. We have Naledi, we have Enke, we have so many different platforms that come through My Voice. And these people work with us to empower the youngsters. My word, by the time they leave, they are confident. Their marks have improved. They have an idea of who they are and what they want to do. They have grit, they have chutzpah, they have determination to change the situation in their community and also in their society, but also more importantly in their family. We always say if we can just change one life, this child can go to varsity, many of them first generation matriculants, many of them first generation university entrants. A lot of them then go to change the situation in their homes, and their younger brothers and sisters will start to say, oh, I want to be like Uputis Banban, or I want to be like Usisis Banban. And that's how you change a community, one child at a time. And we have seen that in our 8 years of running. Some of our youngsters have now qualified with their university degrees. They are working. A lot of them, we're starting to attend weddings. It was just so weird for me.
That's
I know.
incredible.
So-and-so is getting married. What does that say about how old I am?
I wanted to ask. I didn't want to be rude. Does that not make you feel
old? Oh my gosh, I feel old. But it's beautiful to see because these are young men and women who, through the program and a number of interventions, have really flourished. They have blossomed, and it's incredible to see. Lawyers, we're seeing people in the medical fraternity, we're seeing people in different kind of spheres of society, and I can't wait to read about them being president one day or being, the AG or whatever the case may be. We're quite excited.
I mean, it takes a village to raise a child. It sounds very cliche, but I've grown up in that context, and it is very important. And also talking about being important, working with stakeholders, whether it's members of the community, you mentioned other organizations, police, parents.
Oh yeah.
It's 8 years now operational, and now how important was it to have stakeholders helping push Bukobami? You couldn't have done it by yourself.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think everybody has a role to play. Other organizations, as you've mentioned, the parents. Absolutely. And people who donate, who give. We have people who give in their personal capacity. As little as 30 Rand, 50 Rand to just say, every month I'm just going to send through this debit. It goes a very long way. People who come in their professional capacity to say, can I talk to the kids about what it means to be an accountant? That representation matters. When you're seeing someone who looks like you, who's from a background that's similar to yours, and this person says, here's how I made it out of the township. Here's how I made it out of the village. Here's how I made it out of drug and alcohol abuse. Now I'm an accountant. Now I'm a secretary. Now I'm a musician. Now I'm that. A child sees themselves in the eyes of this person who's standing in front of them, and it gives them permission to dream. It gives them an allowance to say, maybe, just maybe, I too can become something like that in my life. And so we work with a lot of people. We always encourage people, if you have a Friday off, because that's when we have the teen talks, if you have a Friday off, spare 2 hours, come hang out with us, come and have a conversation with the kids. Some people will say, I'm having a birthday, can I come through and just have some cake with the kids? Trust me, we think we're changing their lives. They will change your life. There are those kind of kids who will leave you wondering, what am I doing with my life? Where am I going? Because they're just so hungry. And young people, the youth really are energetic. They are vibrant, and it's exciting. We need stakeholders. We need more partners. We need corporates. We need government organizations and institutions. We need civil society groups. We need individuals. We need Stockfelds, people who just come together as a traveling group, etc. Come through. Come talk to the kids about what you do, because you never know. Your own experience that you look down on can really empower these young people and be a catalyst for them to do even greater things in their lives.
And be enriching beyond measure.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Now, a couple of weeks ago, I was on a news site, and I kid you not, the headline reads, Ayanda Allie releases debut album. And I thought, okay, this can't be the same, Ayanda Allie. And I read the article, and it was. And I asked around, and apparently this is something you've been doing for quite a while. When does the music start? I mean, between you're a spokesperson, you're giving voice notes, you're typing statements, you're defending ministers, you're interviewing politicians, you're doing all of this. Where do you find the time to do music? And apparently you're very good. I didn't want to listen because I thought, okay, what if she's bad? But apparently you're very good.
I don't want to lie and say, I say it's really good. I mean, it's an acquired taste, I guess.
Apparently you are very good.
Thank you.
So when did you find the time to harness this talent? Obviously,
you know, it's another cliche. I sang in church, in the church choir,
Grace.
Amazing Grace. But I really did,
Really?
I really did. So I would sing in the church choir. I sang in high school as well. And very few people know this, but I have 2 albums, not an album, but 2 songs that are out. One was featuring KB from Get Rough. He featured me. Let me not get ahead of myself.
Okay.
So KB from Get Rough featured me in one of his albums. And again, it's one of those, featuring Shoop Shoop Girls, etc., etc. The other one was Slicker from Bada Bing. And he had an artist that was out. I think his name was My Man. That was his stage name. And there was a song that I did with him. Again, as a Shoop Shoop Girl in the background. Shoop, 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 shoop.
Wow.
So that's where really music grew. But because of school, because of the opportunities that I got channeled into the communication news spokesperson way. But I'd always been writing, always. Even as a news anchor, I'd have a story that really pulled at my heartstrings and I would write a song. I'd be on an airplane traveling between stories or, going to Parliament with Minister Mbalula, and I'd be writing a song about whatever it was that we were going to do.
Who knew?
I promise you. And I never knew I didn't know what I wanted to do with it per se. I remember in 2017, I thought to myself, let me see if I can record this album. I did about 2 or 3 songs, and then I think I got a job somewhere else in my career. I was like, I'll see these songs, my career took me down a different path. But when I had sat down and reflected on where I was professionally, having done news, having been on the ground through Bukobami, having had a peek at how government and governance worked, and having gone full circle, I thought to myself, life is too short not to explore one of these greatest passions of yours, which is music. I thought to myself, I'm seeing headlines of people passing away. I'm seeing headlines, of the world in absolute chaos. I don't want to leave this earth without having explored this particular talent that I believe is God-given. And I thought maybe now might be the time for me to go into the studio and put some songs together. And that's what I did. Towards the end of 2022, I was like, let's go. There's no greater time like the present. And that's what I did.
And the new age phrase now is shoot your shot. So you're definitely shooting your shot. That's very admirable.
Thank you.
And what's the name? The album is called, I promise you I read this up. Yeah. The album is called
We the People.
We the People. And it releases on the 21st of March.
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Human Rights Day, and I think it's fitting. The album...
Was that intentional?
It was intentional.
Okay,
it was intentional. The album is very much a reflection of our society. I always say it is holding a mirror and showing us who we are, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It is an album that laments status quo. It is an album that looks at all manner of injustices. There's a song about gender-based violence. There's a song about economic inequality in what we saw in the manifestation being Marikana. It is a song about leadership deficit and how we are the ones that we've been waiting for and we need to stand up and lead. It is a song about race relations and Afrophobia or xenophobia. There is a song about many things that we have read about in the headlines, and basically the album does 2 things. One, it's a lament. It is a woe is us, what have we become? But the second approach is a call to action. It then says this is where we are right now. At the moment, South Africa leaves much to be desired, but we are the ones who have the capacity to change the situation for the better. We can point at government, we can point at business, we can point at all these things, but the fact is that we are government. Civil servants are human beings. We are the ones who are working in corporate South Africa. We are the ones who are working on the ground through civil organizations. So we are the ones. We need to come together. We need to put our hands on deck. We need to put our hands to the plow and begin to do that which this country needs in order to move forward. So yeah, that's the two things. One, we lament where we are, but we don't stay there. We get up and we do something. And I think if this CD, if this album can do that for at least one person, my job will be done.
Perfect. And you've been an absolute pleasure, but I just need to ask you something. So I did a little bit of TV, very, very briefly. I did a little bit of TV, and I had a moment where I was anchoring a show with somebody, and I fell asleep. Okay. I kid you not. She stepped on my toe. By the way, this is somebody who's now, this is my predecessor, the former news anchor on Five Breakfast. Okay. And she's stepping on my toe to tell me to wake up. And I wake up. And interestingly, this morning, you had that moment yourself on live TV, and I found this out this morning as I was just doing some of my research.
What are the chances? Yeah.
Was that embarrassing for you? Or you just take it we're just.
Do you know? So the story about that was, I think I was 3 months pregnant at the time, and very few people knew it. So I was really tired. I was exhausted. And it was the end of my shift, and I was about to go like, hoorah, last link. I'm linking to weather, right?
Course.
So I was like, thank you so much for joining us. We're now going to go over to the weather center for some weather. And then we cut to weather, and I literally just put my head on the table, and I'm like, oh, thank goodness. And I just lie there. So my head is on the table. I'm not asleep.
You're
like
not
snoring.
Okay.
But also that is not a position for a news anchor.
Cool.
And then I just, all of a sudden in my earpiece, I'm hearing all sorts of panic in the background. Ayanda, get up. And then I wake up. And I think if you look at the clip, I sort of wake up and I'm just like, what?
Yeah, you do. You do. I saw that.
I'm just like, what's all the fuss? And I move because I didn't know that I'd bled on air. I didn't realize that it went on air.
Of course.
And then afterwards, I think I started getting calls from people like, and then what's going on?
Oh, no.
And somebody wrote an article about it. My word. I was like, ground open up, swallow me whole right now.
Yeah.
But the good thing that came from that is that people started saying, we actually like this news anchor. Oh, she's kind of cute.
Really?
Oh, she's not bad at all. Very articulate, etc. And I think maybe my bosses actually even thought, oh, wait, there's something here. I got a promotion shortly after that. I promise you. So all things work together for the good of they that love the Lord, who are the called according to his purpose.
Wow.
Because I promise you, it got me noticed. You were the news anchor was sleeping, you know? So it got me noticed.
That was your identifier.
That was my identifier. It was the funniest thing. And of course, I've never taken myself too seriously. I think in this job, if you're going to be too hard on yourself and too critical, whenever you are in the public eye in any way, shape, or form, you're going to have deep problems because you are human. You're going to make mistakes. When other people make mistakes, they're in the boardroom. Maybe nobody sees it. When we make mistakes or you're having a bad day at the office, everybody knows, you know? So
Yep.
I learned a long time ago never to take myself too seriously. So I laughed about it, but it actually worked in my favor as well.
Nobody saw my video. Wow, maybe they should have. You never know. I would have been on the BBC or something like that.
Exactly. You see, do you want me to organize it? You must start like retweeting or whatever.
Okay, I think so.
Let's do this thing.
Anna, thank you so much.
Oh,
Much
thank you.
appreciated. And this was so enriching, finding out about who you are, what makes you tick, and what's next for you. You're still doing the broadcasting, which I'm so happy because we still need talented people and in this industry. I'm so glad you're still doing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for having me. And cuts.
This is 5FM.